CJ Peterson, and welcome to The Journey is Real. We talk to real people with real passions who share a real portion of their hearts. Today, my guest is Terrina Wilder, and we're going to be talking gardening. We decided to title this podcast, Never Underestimate the Power of a Planted Seed. We'll find out later why. Terrina, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Gardening is a real treat for me as well. Living on a farm, we have a lot of herbs, spices, fruit trees, and of course the bees work in synergy with them. So I love gardening. Would you please share with us as to why it's your passion though?
Well, one of the reasons why gardening is my passion is because it just allows me to shift gears, decompress, de-stress, and just find a place where whatever is going on in life, I can have that quiet time with God. So it is a place that I tend to try and run to if I can, to break up the monotony of my day or to just get some level of perspective or just expand my thinking if I'm actually stressing too much too. So it's just a wonderful way to have a pastime and to just regroup.
I find God in nature a lot of times. And so for me, planting the seed, like we had talked about, and watching it grow and knowing that, God's taking care of me in that way is just something that I really hold dear to my heart. How did this passion start for you though?
Well, actually, it's amazing. I've been a very career-minded person, I guess, since the age of 18, actually. When I first entered the military, it was all about climbing the corporate ladder and having a 5-year plan, 10-year plan. And I was just such a go-getter that there were times when I would forget to live, really, because there was just so much on my docket or on my plan to try and accomplish. But when I realized, I guess I was in my 30s, when I realized that I needed to just strike a balance between my career as well as my personal life. And by the time I purchased my second home, which ended up being in Utah, I was out in Utah in an area where it's an arid climate. And there weren't many things that I can do other than outdoor activities. I always enjoyed it from my military experience, being outdoors. However, I needed to have a social life. So knowing that I was single and living in Utah, I noticed that being outdoors just brought me a lot of happiness, I guess you could say. And the house that I had purchased was previously owned by a family that had a garden. They planted some wonderful fruit trees and flowers, and then they had a vegetable garden. And I decided, well, let me keep this up. And notice that when I started planting from seed, once the seed goes into the ground and buried under the dirt, it's just a matter of time before you see something emerge. And when I saw that I was able to grow things, I thought, wow, this is fun. And then I can eat what I plant and what have you. So I got very
better when it's
yes, especially organic foods. So I just found myself really intrigued with what I was able to produce and the surprise from that production. So the one thing that I have to say, and it circled me back to the idea of just truly worshiping the creator as opposed to the creation. So that was a theme that went forward with my newfound desire to garden. So that was back in 2007. And so that was 13 years ago. And when I sold that home and moved to Texas, it took about 6 years before I was able to garden again. But it's just one of those things, the restored excitement to seeing things flourish and seeing a harvest produced, it just came back again. So it's just one of those things that really helped me, especially during these pandemic times, to see my garden flourish and just being able to get out there into the garden and just have some quiet time. I find that I'm allowed to, or I find time to journal, which is something I really enjoy, and just quiet myself to hear from the Lord as well, how he may choose to speak and the analogies that he gives me while I'm out there. So, yeah.
Can you give a couple, I don't know if it's too personal, can you give a couple of analogies that
Oh, no,
might?
no, that's not too personal. Well, last year, I actually had a very quick harvest, and I was growing a lot of green leafy vegetables and tomatoes and things of that nature. And it was my first time planting those particular um, greens in this Texas climate. Was able to get 3 or 4 pickings or harvesting times out of that
That
one.
would be a trick in Texas because the Texas heat is brutal.
It really is. So to know that I got that harvest, I was all excited and just thinking, wow, this is great. So being single and living, for the most part, on my own to, store up my meals and prepare my meals in advance and things of that nature, I quickly found that I was running out of storage room. Next thing you know, the garden started to experience an infestation of harlequin bugs, and my turnip greens were being eaten from the root all the way up to the stems. And I mean, it was really bad to a point where other gardeners, I'm in a community garden, and the other gardeners started sending me little nasty, well, I shouldn't say nasty, but they sent me little reminder emails to tend to my garden and the infestation.
You
So,
can't control that.
so then I remember at one point I was out in the garden trying to deal with the insects and things of that nature. And after tilling and cleaning or spraying down the produce, I sat in the garden, and that's when God revealed to me uh, that He is still God over the creation in the good seasons as well as the bad. So my trust can't be in my abilities, but it has to be in his. And how he chooses to give favor and how he chooses not to. So that's one example. Storing up things in such a way where I was focused just on Terrina. Sometimes when we are so, well, let me just be blunt, selfish, God will sometimes remove his favor. And that was one of those reminders to let me know that it's more than just about me and the blessings that he's bestowing on me, but I should have been sharing my produce with the other gardeners. And there was one lady who certainly was in need. And it was after this incident that God revealed to me that I should have blessed her with a bag of greens, for instance. So God definitely deals with us in such marvelous ways to get us to a point to humble ourselves and be reminded of who is responsible for our blessings. So,
Definitely.
yeah.
I know with the bees, they can be kind of sometimes a little invasive. So
Yes.
shall we say? And we cannot control them any more than you can control the pests in your garden, really. Where they go is up to them. They can go anywhere within a 3 to 5 mile radius, actually up to about 3 mile radius.
Okay.
For harvesting. And so what we did was we got a couple messages from a couple different neighbors. And so we just took them 8 ounces of honey and they were happy. Just, sorry for them invading your bird bath, but here you go.
Right,
You
right.
really can't fully control it. But what you can control is, helping others.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You can control, what's going on around you.
Absolutely.
If you see a need, or if last year, some people who follow us are aware that while we were gone for 3 days, somebody came in and literally stripped our pear trees, took 300 to 400 pears off of our tree.
Oh, wow.
And I called the police, and I'm just like, I can almost hear them laughing in the background, but I'm thinking, just because it's on a tree does not make it any less a crop. That's like somebody taking an acre of corn from a farmer.
Absolutely.
That's our money.
Yeah.
That's how we make our money. And so like this year, what we did was we protected everything. You know, we put signs up, we put cameras up all over
Sure.
the yard, all over the 5 acres. There's cameras and signs everywhere. And
Sure.
people left them alone this year.
Oh, well, that's good.
But it reminded us that, you know, we need to take care of what's here, or
Right.
somebody's going to sneak in and take them out from underneath you. We were literally
yeah.
gone from Thursday at 3 o'clock. By the time we came back on Saturday at 3 o'clock, both trees were stripped all the way to the top.
Oh my.
They waited until we had left. Had they, and I kept telling people, I'm like, had they asked us, we would have given them a dozen pears.
Right. Right.
You know, obviously, if they needed them, or if, you know, they wanted them for jelly, they can make jelly. We'd give them like a dozen pears, no big deal.
Right.
But don't take all of them. And so it's just make sure that you're protecting yourself as well.
And you know, sometimes people take your kindness for weakness,
Mm-hmm.
and
They don't anymore.
you know, I don't believe God has put us here on earth to just be doormats, to be taken advantage of. I mean, he definitely wants us to be loving and show gestures of kindness, but by no means does that mean that we are to allow people to take advantage of us. And when wrong is rendered to us, we ought to seek for justice. But the key thing is, he is our vindicator.
Mm-hmm.
So just like with you just putting signs up and putting the precautions up to let folks know that, hey, you know, don't just come and help yourself. God is that vindicator. And I feel that there are times, again, going out to the garden, he would certainly reveal to us that here's the wisdom that I want you to walk in. Here's the plan that you need to put forth, and this is how you address those who may do something wrong. I love it when he does that, because oftentimes when we get into our own devices, we get into strife, contention, and the result is not glorifying God. So I think that's wonderful. In my garden, we've had to put up, again, this is a community garden, and those who oversee the garden know that the gardeners like myself, we put forth the sweat equity to tend to our own little plots. And there are now signs up, but there was a time when people would try and help themselves to what we were growing and the work and labor that we put forth in growing our produce. So those little signs have helped. It deterred people from just helping themselves. But I have to admit, when it comes to meeting other gardeners out in the garden, we're sharing crops, we're sharing success stories, or how we overcame some kind of infestation or a drought or some thwarting process in the garden. So I love being able to be out in the garden and to see how we're trying to help each other. Whether we're in a pandemic or not, it's just wonderful to be able to, I would say, iron sharpening iron, just building each other up and encouraging each other, helping each other be successful gardeners. So
Exactly.
all life lessons.
And there's a lot of parallels from the spiritual walk to gardening.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
I have a blog that's called The Journey to Fruitfulness, and we're taking our 5 acres from ground zero and turning it into a fully functioning, self-sustaining farm. So a lot of the blogs that are titled Serenity Synergy I titled it that because, you know, we're working with the bees are working to pollinate the crops are turning around and feeding us. And so it's a synergy effect.
Absolutely.
But what I do is, you know, the different lessons that you learn in farming, because there's a lot of them. I put the lessons, usually 2 or 3 different lessons that I learned in that particular blog, and I apply them spiritually to our spiritual walk. And sometimes I'm just amazed at even just the little things throughout the day, but something as simple as even planting a seed for the starters. You know, not every seed is going to grow, just like not every person you're going to talk to is going to want to make a decision for Christ. However, you did plant a seed.
Right.
Whether somebody else comes by and waters it, or God himself waters it, or, you know, the sun decides that, hey, I'm going to give this one a little bit more sun, you know, it's going to grow. And the parallels are kind of phenomenal because we each started as a seed.
Right.
Some of us are pushed down a little bit further, so it took us a little bit longer to get to the top, and to kind of peak out and start to grow and start to flourish. But hopefully, you know, you landed in the right soil.
Right.
It's kind of like this, the parable of the sower.
Yes.
Seeds that tossed into the side. And, you know, and also it's a matter of, like you were talking about, community investment. I was a youth leader for 18 years. And as a youth leader, among several other youth leaders and the youth pastor, you know, we helped grow, sometimes plant seeds, help grow seeds, help maintain the garden of the youth group's spiritual garden.
Absolutely.
With God, hand in hand, you have to. He's the ultimate gardener. But we work together as a community that you had mentioned, and growing each of those teens. But in turn, it also actually helped us grow as well. We learned a lot from them as well. And that's that whole iron sharpening iron. It's not just the older teaching the younger. Sometimes the younger teaches the older.
And that to me is amazing, because when the younger teach the older, I mean, when you think about it, think about King David. He had brothers who were more fit for battle and more fit for leadership than he was. He was a shepherd boy. But when Samuel came to anoint the next king, the idea that David's father had was that it would have been one of David's other brothers, I mean, not David. And the reality is, sometimes blessings and God's plan resides in the least expected. And I think that is one of the things that I have found during these recent years, to be open-minded. When I go out into the garden, I planted white corn, and that is so unseasonable right now. This is not the corn season. And here in Texas, you wouldn't expect corn to be growing at this time, but amazingly, I got corn growing. It amazes me when we don't limit God and we realize that we serve a God of the impossible. There's nothing too difficult for him. So he can get things to grow when, you know, man's logic says, oh, this is not possible. So he goes against the odds even. He promotes or elevates those who are in leadership that you would think shouldn't be. Look at our current political climate. So I think the reality is we have to let God be who he is, the greatest God, the almighty God, and our answers come from him. He is the creator. He's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. So when it comes to what he starts, he is faithful to complete it. So whatever is going on in the garden, if you will, the garden of our lives, the garden of our relationships, the garden of our hearts and our relationship to the Father, you know, God has a way of speaking to us in such a profound way that he can give us insight, he can give us knowledge to handle whatever is faced with us. Even this pandemic, we don't have to go through life in fear, but we can trust the one who controls it all anyway.
Well, in the Bible, it says 365 times, do not fear.
Yeah.
Literally 365 times it says, do not fear. One for every day. He's trying to say something, because usually when something's repeated in the Bible, it's trying to make it a little bit brighter, like a neon sign. I don't think he can get that any brighter if he tried. Do not fear.
That's so true.
It says, you know, don't worry. You know, do the sparrows worry about food? Do the lilies of the valley worry about clothes? No. So why do we?
Yeah.
God will take care of us.
But you know what, CJ? I think the reason why people fear is because they lose focus. They take their eyes off of God, the one who is the source of their confidence. It says that he hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and sound mind. And that sound mind comes from our belief pattern, how we perceive Almighty God. the one who is in control? Do we truly believe it? I mean, it can be cliche for us to say, oh, yes, God, I believe in God and I know he's my creator and he's my Lord, he's Lord over my life. But is he really? Are we acting and behaving as though he is? So sometimes we got to check ourselves. And that's one of the things when I go out to the garden, yeah, I'm checking myself as to whether or not my belief is truly in the Lord for everything. So I'm really thankful for being able to get refocused and recentered through my experience in the garden.
Yeah, a lot of times it's control too.
Yes.
You have to realize that we're not the ones that are in control. We are not in control of our lives any more than we are of what actually decides to grow in our garden.
Yeah.
And then we try to take control over it and we end up messing up the fruit and stuff by putting all these chemicals in it, and it doesn't taste as good.
No.
And so life doesn't taste as good when we try to, add it and take care of it ourselves without realizing that, God's the one that's in control. And I'm, for one, I'm very thankful because I don't want to be in control of it. What he gives us is what we have. And what we have, we need to count as a blessing every single day.
Absolutely. Once you think about it, fear is a selfish response because it's taking the focus off of our Creator. It's taking the focus off of what God truly intends for us to be mindful of. So, yeah.
Before we run out of time, I do know that you are an author. Would you please share a little bit about what you're working on right now?
So right now I'm working on this short story for an anthology, a Christmas anthology.
Which I happen to know is through Texas Sisters Press, and by the time this airs, it should be either out there or close to it.
There you go. Yeah, so the short story is about It Takes a Village. It's about a young man. Within a year's time span, he becomes a married young man, a new father, and a widower within less than a 12-month period. So it's a journey for him, to say the least, to see how people can rally around him and be a support system.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
So people who want to know more about you, how do they find you online?
So I do have a website. It is www.TerrinaWilder.com, and that's spelled TerrinaWilder.com.
Okay, awesome. And we have just a few minutes left because we kind of went on a funny trail, which I love doing, but I want to make sure, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, the one thing I just would love for people to know or know about me is that I love giving a sense of hope and pointing people to the Father. One of my biggest passions is understanding how everything ties back to Him. We have our being and our purpose in life as a result of our Heavenly Father. So one of the things I would love to encourage people to do is visit my website and connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Those are the platforms that I'm currently on.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to reading your short story for our anthology, and I'm sure others looking forward to it. And again, if you want to find out more about Terrina, you can head to her website, which is www.TerrinaWilder.com. Thank you for coming on today, Terrina, and for sharing a portion of your heart.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Love to have you again. Whenever you get a new book coming out, let me know.
Absolutely.
And thank you guys for listening to The Journey is Real, where we talk to real people with real passions who share a real portion of their hearts. I'm CJ Peterson of CJPetersonWrites.com. Until next time.